where I was learning academically and then implement physically, I could actually see materially the benefits of what I was learning. And I think my learning curve I sort of escalated faster when I did that bridging. And I think going to university and me and my cohort, they didn't have that opportunity. Maybe they weren't working, or they sort of went with that traditional, I'm in university, so I'm a full-time student approach. So they didn't have that chance to bridge. So I think I would agree with Beryl. It's currently broken, but it's also how do we actually sort of give that opportunity to people to then apply what they've learnt physically and actually materially see the benefit. That's probably one of the keys, I would say.
Yeah, I thought it was very insightful when Darryl was talking about people. I personally always say to all of our staff in the factory and at Arnott's, don't worry about the equipment, it's 80% of the people. We've got to work through our people. And my learnings over the years, having started at the early age of 16, doing a trade and then doing many other courses, as Darryl said, picked up lots of little pieces, and then went back and actually did a marketing business degree. I think the education system and what I was looking for as we expanded the factory was the new talent, the new mindset. We had many meetings with TAFE out of Blacktown, meetings with the Mayor at Barley out of Blacktown about universities and different aspects. And we unfortunately didn't get the talent we want because it's not there. We are not training and we're not developing people with the bits of information and the training that they need to come ready into your supply chain. I totally respect the education system. I did my degree all part-time, was a hard yakka, but spending 4 or 5 years in a university, we absolutely need those people, but we need other people too that probably can benefit from smaller training courses and be a bit more nimble in the supply chain, with my thoughts.
No, that's fine. I'm waiting for these questions.
Yes, so I think, we should... anyone have a question particularly related to this, or we'll start with this question? Yep.
Yes, I'm Damien Howe from University of Melbourne. I think
okay, why don't you stand up first?
Trevor, I was interested that you have a list of skills required, and right at the top is business ethics. The empirical evidence would suggest maybe that's problematic in a lot of industries in supply chain. Have you got a comment on that, why it was right at the top?
Yeah, that's quite bizarre you picked that. That was a cut and paste, but from a site. It wasn't my... But I would reinforce and I can just talk on our business perspective. Ethics come top of the list. In relation to, and I'm assuming we're talking about how people behave, how people work, how we collaborate. If you don't have that mindset, then you have a bit of a divided team, right? So we try to reinforce that. I think the ethical component when you come to a larger business and supply chain are really critical. Is that answering you?
I was just really interested if it's at the top of the list.
Yeah. Well, I think we all know most of the global organisations, one of their traditional awards each year is on ethics, right? If you're in the Campbell business, they hold that highly. We see it as a critical component.
Because it could be suggested it's a bit of an oxymoron. So
well,
it's a difficult concept in practice. So.
I attended in here about 2 months ago from our finance services people the results of a research program on looking at the ethics of lending and investing officers in banks in Australia, and it was clear, and it was quite a good longitudinal study, so it has some validity. It was clear that the thing that drives the ethics of people when they're making investment decisions and recommendations is the reward and payment structure for their individual salaries. That you can actually train people in business ethics, which they do, but at the end of the day, when faced with a choice between an ethical decision and no bonus, or a bonus, the majority of particularly people who are officers trained in this area will go for the bonus. So it could be an oxymoron, but I also think it's a behavioural oxymoron in the other sense that I think there are ways of, there might be ways of changing incentive programs to support ethics rather than doing what a lot of institutions do, which is create KPIs and reward structures that actually encourage people to be less ethical.
And maybe if I could just add, and this might be getting into too much detail, as an example, I work for an organisation that your annual review, bonuses, whatever, is actually 50% of the results, and we call it the what and how, and 50% of the how. So our organisation drives that behavioural piece through those rewarding mechanisms. So it doesn't mean that everyone behaves well, but I think it sort of funnels most of us through the right way.
So any other questions around people and education? Yeah.
Coming to the same list, your list of digital skills, computer skills are completely missing from your list of capabilities. Given that we've got your colleague next to you kind of getting these high-tech towers going, given your lovely picture of driverless control things, I was wondering why that's not there. Maybe also for others think, why are digital skills important these days? I was very surprised not to see it there.
I'll just... Visual?
Digital.
I just want to reinforce something. That list was not my list. I put it up there to create a forum that absolutely within supply chain there's skills needed. And I wasn't going to come here and tell people what they are, but I would reinforce what we're getting through some of the education system is not what we need. But I would say from the digital, absolutely. You come to our factory in Honeywood, it is like a visual factory. We are now running, we talk about process control and statistical validation, where we used to fill out process sheets every 30 minutes. We are now using scanning and visual systems to measure every biscuit. 3,000 Tim Tams a minute. We know what size, what shape they are, and what's happening. So absolutely, that digital awareness is on top of the pile as well.
Sorry, one of the things I was going to mention, are you familiar with the US Department of Labor database called ONET? ONET? It's O-Net online. I recommend you go to it. I went to it in anticipation of this and typed in supply chain manager. It has 15,000 skill sets across 5,000 occupational groups. The printout for supply chain manager is fascinating reading, not the least of which is technology skills. And they have, as all US systems do, they have lots of little icons that sort of show you, in case you can't read, there's actually an icon that will help you. All the technology skills, you'd think it was actually a skills list written by Microsoft, but all the technology skills are hot topics right now, that you can't run a supply chain manager's job according to this US database list without all those technology skills. I might say that the other hot item on supply chain managers, as represented by a lovely green leaf, is green skills, environmental skills. So from the US Department of Labor, the hot topics, and I really do recommend you jump on and have a look at this at some stage if you want to, are technology skills and environmental skills.
I might just add one thing, sorry, Tava. It's not so much, in my view, how to actually understand the technology, because garbage in, garbage out. What I'm seeing is if people can understand and articulate how what they're doing in the system impacts the physical world and the physical environment, they actually have a better understanding of why that system was built the way it was. So, for example, if a company, and I see a lot with large multinationals, they've bought a big SAP or a big system from someone large, and they've rolled it out globally. And then I go and work with the operators who are actually doing the day-to-day. They're manipulating, they're putting data in different fields, they're not using the system how it was designed. And I think you've got to get that balance right, because if the people don't actually understand what they're doing and how it impacts the result, then when you roll all the data up and you look at something and you make a decision for the business based on that insight, you can actually make the wrong decision, if that kind of makes sense. So I think it's about understanding the input and the output and how the actual system impacts. And that's probably one of the skills, I would say.
Yes.
Get all of the criticism toward educators. Believe me, we all have the same criticism toward us. Do you have any practical solution? I don't see any practical solution from you guys.
I think it's also industry problem.
For example, in US, we tried our best to send the students as interns during the summer to get some real education. But there is a huge amount of limitations here. If you have some suggestions, please.
So I'll start. I think industry needs to open up a bit more, because a lot, if you see, for example, some clients, so a lot of customers are closed book. They don't want to share too much about the supply chain because they think it's too risk. So for interns, I think, well, I had an internship with P&G and that's how I landed my job. So they opened up and said, we have this problem with logistics terms with our big customers. We've had it for many years. Just figure it out. But they sort of laid out the platform for me to have a crack at it without sort of going and getting coffee and these sorts of things. So I think industry needs to step up as well. And it's got to be that right collaboration between the two.
Look, I tend to agree. I came through the education system, so it didn't damage me too much. I wouldn't be where I am now if I didn't have that, so I'm very grateful for that. It got us to where we are, but it's not going to get us to where we want to be in the next 10 or 15 years. That's probably the feedback. It's interesting you raise it. So just at our local site out of Blacktown, we have a pretty proactive mayor, Stephen Barley. He's just been voted in as, I think he's one of the state members now. He's very keen actually to have a university built out at Blacktown, very much focused on catering for the needs of the industry within the area. So what he's been doing is actually taking a lot of time as a politician to meet with the supply chain team out around his area and getting input, looking for support, and what are the needs in of that area, what's the evolving needs. So out there, it's a bit of manufacturing, a lot of warehousing, a lot of IT. They've just built the cloud out there at Honeywood. So I think definitely agree with Tim. It's like we've got to help. We can't, we've got to nurture, and businesses have to invest. And I think a lot of businesses have stopped doing that over the years. When we look back at the traditional apprenticeships and different structures around cadetships, that they seem to be on the decline. So industry, I think, has to play a big part in that.
4 possibilities. One, with technology that's presently available, I don't understand why campuses are still regarded as the focus for learning, when in fact it should be possible to embed a great deal of learning in the organisations themselves. In other words, create campuses internally inside companies, which some people are doing. But it's still regarded as a kind of one-off, whereas I think it maybe is the future. So the question of getting the bricks and mortar mentality shifted is number 1 in my mind. Number 2, different and better use of adjunct appointments. I think adjuncts have been used as cheap teaching substitution in many universities, and I think there's now a culture of that which it would be great to break, because adjuncts, I think, can bring industry experience to the classroom in ways that people who are career academics cannot. Thirdly, I think that it is possible to create appropriate internship programs. Macquarie University has something called PACE, P-A-C-E, which works because they build relationships with the organisations over a period. In other words, it's not a transactional relationship, it's a collaborative relationship to engage interns, not as high-cost free labour, but as part of the strategy for the business to develop. And finally, something we'll be exploring next year, and I'd be keen to get feedback, if not now then other people. Steve Brammer, who's the Executive Dean who you'll be speaking to later, and I were talking yesterday about a concept which we're going to call Professors of Practice. Professors of Practice. in which we're going to invite senior people from industry to come and spend 20 days a year teaching as fractional appointments, as professors on campus in specially designed programs where students, preferably graduate students, but probably also undergraduate students, get to spend time in a structured environment with people from industry who get to carry the title Professor of Practice, which a lot of people I know at senior levels would love to do. They would love to come back and actually give back something to the universities. So formal Professors of Practice, internship programs on a different basis, the creation of better adjunct programs, and breaking down the bricks and mortar mentality, to me are four practical things that one could consider doing at any university anywhere in the world.
I have a question about the list. I just kidding.
You can always.
So I think the 4 points you just mentioned, I think all of them actually currently exist, and still things not going forward. I think one point is just a kind of a demand supply, I mean whether the demand creates supply or supply creates demand. I think if it's a hiring spot, if companies give more value to practical programs of universities, which can basically in turn incentivize those universities to provide those programs, I think that can be one of those external factors just mentioned. So I think we had, for example, an online program that was just costing the students half of the costs they were usually for paying for in-class. And it was a very practical program, but they had problems getting employed because they said that, okay, this is not kind of a usual program, it's an online program, we don't know what happens, so we just still needed to offer the classical education to these students. So if we saw more demand in, for example, online program or less costly program, then we incentivize universities. So it should be something cost structure, some I think incentive involved, something like that, for few changes you just made.
No, I
Thanks. Yes. Yeah.
Professor Hall, I'm a practitioner and I really enjoyed your talk, and I echo your sentiment about not winning an argument with a medical professional. I couldn't get a strategy implemented for buying non-latex gloves to reduce the hospital cost because a doctor wouldn't agree. And it's probably because I don't have something attached to my name as a professional versus somebody who has an MD or an RN. My question would be, have you considered SIPS Australia and probably incorporating the courses for MSIPs and teaching public procurement, for example, in universities like this? And my second question would be for every panelist. We're talking about modern supply chains, and today's supply chain is also inflicted with modern slavery, and technology can have so much influence in addressing that. What are you guys thinking, and what have you done towards that?
In a previous life, I ran a government-funded technology and transport centre. We created, in conjunction with the LAA and a few other people, a certification for professional logistician, a CPL. We ran it for 5 years. We funded it. It was spectacularly unsuccessful. Spectacularly unsuccessful. We kept reducing the price point to where you could actually, it was cheaper to get this than buy a dog. And people still went out and bought dogs. And that's my learning from the profession argument. It's no point in having the post-nominals and the certification names unless it comes from a culture where that is actually recognised as something valuable. It's the horse before the cart. And there is a lot of work to be done, I think 5 or 10 years work to be done by the industry in conjunction with the educators to build that culture of professionalism till finally a CPL will have the recognition that that it deserves. And between now and then, you have my empathy and my sympathy, as do a lot of my colleagues who are desperately trying to do the right thing and run up against the entrenched cultures that prevent them from doing it. Not inside universities, of course, which are eminently flexible and have no structural impediments whatsoever.
Just so I respond to that second question, could I just, I might have missed the interpretation. Could you just repeat that?
Oh, yeah. So a lot of social issues are emerging with the supply chain, and there has been a lot of inquiries about child labor or modern slavery. And the solution to that is still not very clear for everybody. Everybody's still asking the question on how to de-risk their supply chain. And this is an opportunity to ask you if you have done something similar, or have you started addressing that issue?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if I missed the point, please correct me. Gentleman talked about ethics.
Yes.
You know, I've been very fortunate. I've worked with 3 multinationals, Unilever, SC Johnson and now Campbell Arnott's. And over the years, they've obviously modified some of their behaviours. The ethical sourcing question for our business, we talked about input costs, has significantly increased our product cost. But we wouldn't want it any other way. So the people that work within our organisation, you can go through our homepage, you can go through our websites, you'll see whether it's the sourcing of oil, whether it's the sourcing of cocoa, throughout the world, Campbell's are held extremely high ethically. I think where it then leads to is we talk about where the retailers and the end seller and the user, ultimately we have to educate those people that we're doing that for the benefit of the globe, and then they have to engage in that from a price point. And I think a lot of the retailers are. So I'm trying to make the point we can do as much as we can do from an ethical perspective. It then needs the second guard, I suppose, from a retail and consumer perspective to buy into that and, you know, not purchase those products that are not moving towards the ethical sourcing model. Does that answer?
So I could probably give you an actual example and point. What I think is happening is consumers are starting to pay more attention to that. Young consumers are, because they're having more of a sort of emotional connection with stuff they see on Facebook and everything like that. So that's from a commercial sales, you know, consumer behaviour side, right? And then what's happening, I'm seeing in the supply chain, is actually a lot of the marketing people within organisations are coming to supply chain saying, how can we leverage some of this insight to tap into that emotional sort of consumer thought or feeling? And so for examples like farm to plate or farm to glass, these things where they're allowing consumers to track their product or their thing of beer or whatever you want to track, all the way from source, and then sort of click and understand the farm, and there's a bit of story behind it. So it's like a bit of a bridge between marketing and supply chain to actually tap into that. And when you get a bit of awareness, you can actually crack that properly.
And actually, if I can ask a follow-on for that. So a lot of the issues are around issues of visibility, and certainly, Tim, you talked a huge amount about the importance of visibility. There's a lot of stuff in social media about, you know, the millennials all being willing to share everything. Do we actually see that helping our supply chain visibility as sort of the new generation of supply chain managers come in? They've got a sort of a less, my data, nobody else can have it. I mean, is that actually something you're observing, or am I just being wishful thinking?
So I can probably just quickly start. 1 + 1 does equal 3, and I think people are starting to realise that. If I talk to you and I talk, hang on, if you've got something that insight, that means for this for me, and then all of a sudden it's starting to get a bit more value collectively. So yes, the other piece is data is king. So the more data and visibility you've got, and then how you crunch that is where a lot of the value is coming, and I think people are starting to realise that.
Yeah, look, so I wasn't bagging the education system too much, because I love nothing but to get cadets into our plan. I see a re-energised way that they do things, and that their collaboration, their intelligence level, their ability to work, and definitely does change the dynamics within the workforce, and I think we need to continue to do that.